Universal Studios almost unleashed some of the scariest rides ever, but they were too terrifying to survive. A Stephen King nightmare, a ghostly Casper haunt, and more. Let's dive into the horror attractions that never were.
Like always, Quackbird.
Stephen King themed horror attraction. Stephen King is famous for his hair-raising horror stories, many of which have even made it to the big screen. Now, whether you're a Stephen King fan or just a horror fan in general, this ride would have definitely been chilling. Now, this ride was planned around the same time Universal was considering to buy the rights to the Men in Black. John Murdy, who is now known for being the creative director for Hollywood's Halloween Horror Nights, was given the task of coming up with a Stephen King-themed horror attraction. The ride was going to be based on two Stephen King novels, The Shining and It. Both of these stories being fan favorites, it would have been an amazing, immersive experience for all fans. I mean, imagine Pennywise coming at you. I feel literal chills just thinking about it. The most notable part of this ride was going to be the trick ending. Guests would pull into the unloading station. The usual instructions for getting off the ride without any injury would be played over the speakers, but the restraints would not lift. This would effectively prevent the passengers from getting off the ride. That is when the real fun would start, with a huge pool of blood flooding out the exit doors before passengers could understand what was happening. All of a sudden, Pennywise would spring up in front of them from the control room to attack riders. Guests would realize that he had been the ride operator all along, kind of like what we see in the Mummy ride at Universal Studios Florida right now. The scared riders would move further into the nighttime, narrowly escaping, going in the direction of the gift shop. This would have been an authentic and thrilling experience for fans. There was a huge fake wall of blood planned for the ride that would be amazing, but equally difficult to accomplish because it would require a special plumbing system, and the cost that this would need could just not be justified by the people in charge. So the whole ride ended up being scrapped, even though it came very close to becoming a reality. Now, instead of a Stephen King ride, they came up with the Men in Black Alien Attack ride. The trick ending, of course, was adopted in Revenge of the Mummy. It's good to know that at least a part of the original Stephen King ride remains in some form. Casper the Friendly Ghost has had the love of audiences since the first cartoon came out in 1945. But when the live-action movie was released in the 90s, a wave of love for the character came back all again. This was perfect because at the time, Universal was looking to add more family and kid-friendly attractions. Once the film turned out to be successful, they thought it would make for a great addition to their park and also offer some family-friendly entertainment. Moreover, Steven Spielberg had produced the movie, meaning that the rights could be easily attained. The idea was to have guests ride in a vehicle fashioned like a four-poster bed. There would be a candelabra at the foot of the bed which guests could use to control it. The bed would take guests on a tour of the haunted house from the movie, which we would have loved. There was also another concept created for the same ride. Guests would be in suspended cars and would fly over the set going on the same tour of the house. There are not many details about this ride, and it is not clear whether the ride was going to be built in Universal Studios Florida or at Islands of Adventure. Sadly, the concept never left the planning room. It didn't even become fully fledged before it was scrapped. Still, guests did get their Casper fix after all, because in 1995, Universal Studios Florida had a Casper-themed walk. You could take a walk through Whipstaff Manor and encounter ghosts in the Mee. Sadly, it is extinct now, but it must have been an amazing experience for all those who got to visit it. Terminator 2 rides. When Universal Studios Florida had just opened its doors in 1990, they only had a few attractions and they were planning to add more. During this time, Terminator 2 was released and it instantly became a massive success. It was also set in LA, so it was a great fit for the park's Hollywood theme. So Universal began developing a ride based on the movie. For this, Universal asked Landmark Entertainment to create some concepts on what they thought a Terminator-inspired attraction or ride would look like. And this was perfect because Universal was already working with them on Jurassic Park River Adventure at Islands of Adventure. Landmark Entertainment came up with a few different concepts. One of the concepts was a roller coaster. This ride would be set in a post-apocalyptic Los Angeles, and it would have taken riders through a very thrilling, adrenaline-filled ride through the city. The goal was to mirror the high speed and effects of the film. However, this concept was scrapped, most likely due to the lack of space. The E.T. Adventure Show building was right behind the designated location, so space would have been a little tight. This was replaced by another Terminator 2 attraction. So the next concept was brought up. This new concept was an interactive war zone. Again, the attraction would take place in a post-apocalyptic war zone in LA, where guests would be able to join in on the war between humans and machines. This concept was also scrapped in favor of the third concept that was proposed, Terminator 2 3D Battle Across Time. Probably because this would have been more impressive and easier to operate. This attraction was built not only at the Universal Studios in Hollywood and Orlando, but also in Japan. Sadly, today, both the Universal attractions were closed. The one at Universal Studios Hollywood was replaced by Despicable Me Minion Mayhem, and the one at Universal Studios Florida was replaced by The Bourne Stuntacular, a live-action stage stunt show based on the Bourne movies. The one at Universal Studios Japan, however, is still going strong. Van Helsing. We've talked before about the Kuka robo-coaster arm that achieves the stunning flying effect in Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey. While this is the first time Universal used this system for a ride, Universal had planned to use it on another ride that they planned back in the early 2000s. Van Helsing was released in 2004, and it became one of the highest grossing films of the early 2000s. In the film, Hugh Jackman plays a monster hunter and interacts with several monsters such as Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and even Dr. Jekyll. This movie was a perfect fit to become a ride at the time because, as you can see, the monsters from the movie were all Universal monsters, and not only that, Van Helsing was directed by Stephen Sommers, who had previously collaborated with Universal for the Revenge of the Mummy ride at Universal Studios Florida. Not many details are known about this proposed ride. All we know is that it was going to be built in the location where Hogsmeade now exists. It would also have to include a lot of special effects as well as projection screens. Nobody knows why this concept was scrapped, but there are two theories. One is that Universal never went ahead with this ride because the movie received negative criticism despite pulling a healthy $300 million at the box office. Moreover, the movie was not good enough to warrant a sequel, so Universal's hopes was that it would become a famous franchise like The Mummy. That went down the drain. The second is that Universal decided to go with the Harry Potter themed ride and attaining the rights to it simply because it was more popular. Either way, this ride took a back seat. Still, Universal decided to create a smaller Van Helsing inspired attraction. This attraction was a walk-through horror show called Van Helsing Fortress Dracula. It was placed at the front of the park with many elements from the movie. In this, you got to walk in Van Helsing's footsteps to the supernatural world of the 19th century Transylvania. On the way, you would encounter various monsters made even more scary with spine-tingling special effects and screams and authentic movie props. You could explore Dracula's crypt while being attacked by a swarm of flying bats and plunge deep into the dark catacombs while ferocious werewolves howled in the distance. You would also find a bunch of vampires and other monsters jumping out from corners trying to get you. In short, this was the Van Helsing movie come to life. This haunted attraction also had a second level. Unfortunately, this attraction only lasted for 2 years because people forgot about the movie very quickly. It just didn't make sense to have the walkthrough still up after that. Instead, it made way for the House of Horrors, which utilized many of the elements from the Van Helsing walkthrough. The first Halloween Horror Nights ever was held at Universal Studios Hollywood in 1986, with the Terror Tram being its signature attraction. Sadly, there was an accident during the event where a scare actor lost their life, and the event did not come back the following year. It wasn't until 1991 when Universal Studios Florida had their first Halloween event under the title Fright Nights, likely to separate this event from the tragedy that happened during the first Horror Nights event. Halloween Horror Nights came back to Universal Studios Hollywood in 1992, but it was abandoned the following year because Universal found it to be too expensive and also difficult to make. So Universal had no Halloween events. This was not a great move because during this time, Halloween events started popping up all over the place, from Not Scary Farm, which had their first event way back in 1973, to even the Queen Mary Ship, which had its first Halloween event called Shipwreck in 1995. So Universal wanted to create an event for the season that would allow them to compete with other events but also stay cost effective. Enter Chamber of Chills. Universal turned to Ron Howard and Brian Grazer's Imagine Entertainment Inc. to create this new attraction. They also looked to Spencer Gifts to create a partnership for this new project. Chamber of Chills would be a single walk-through maze that would open at Universal City Walk, but also in other 10 locations in shopping malls across the country. Universal held auditions for the attraction at City Walk, where there would be casting directors and professionals rating the scare actors along Dracula and Frankenstein's monster. You could say that the auditions were an event in itself. Universal's Chamber of Chills opened on Friday, September 13th, and it cost $8 per ticket. This was unprecedented, and at the time there were even talks about how there was a limit to how much holiday-related entertainment the public could consume. People thought that despite Universal's early launch that year, September would never become the new industry standard for unveiling Halloween attractions. That comment definitely did not age well. The maze had 11 themed rooms that were assembled into a 6,480 square foot maze. There were many different themes. Guests entered a kind of circus room filled with clowns, a trophy room where a series of famous monster heads were mounted along the walls, appearing like hunters' trophies, a medieval torture chamber where a Jack the Ripper inspired character appeared. There was a lab where we could see a life-size figure of the Crypt Keeper and a mad scientist trying to bring the Bride of Frankenstein to life. There was also a room with a red devil and an exorcist-inspired possessed girl, an evil scarecrow with a chainsaw, and a surprise ending where Freddy Krueger appeared. Outside of the chamber, there was a Spencer Gifts gift shop with Halloween-themed merchandise. The experience closed on November 3rd of that same year, and plans to expand the brand were well underway. Universal wanted to develop television series and books based on the brand. But this never happened, and the whole project was abandoned in favor of bringing back Halloween Horror Night. So the following year, Universal Studios Hollywood brought back Halloween Horror Nights and continued to do so until 2000. They had a small break from the event from 2001 to 2005, but in 2006 it came back and has continued coming back ever since.